I want to give you just kind of an overall presentation of our system. That's going to be some old information for some of us. There could be some very new information for some of us. We're going to talk a little bit about some regulatory challenges that we've been working through with EPA and with EGLE. Many of you industries are very well aware of that as we are continuing to work through our new sewer use ordinance. We're also going to be talking about capital programs, O&M programs, some of these line item budget items that are creating some budget pressures for us overall. We're then going to get into kind of the meat and potatoes of why you're here, that rate presentation. We're going to go into a deep dive and kind of understand what the rates recommendations are moving forward. It is very complex. It's not a uniform rate like we have in water. We've got many different rate classifications to kind of go into. We're also going to recognize a few of our industries with some IPP awards. We talked about regulations and how important that is for us to deal with EPA. We figured that it's also important for us to recognize the industries that are doing a really great job and recognize some individuals that are really going above and beyond. After that, we'll kind of introduce what the next steps are, where do we go from here, and then we'll conclude. We are going to be doing a plant tour today, so if anybody is interested, just stay with us. And when I'm done with the presentation, we'll be kicking off a plant tour as well. So jumping right into it, the wastewater utility, we serve 22 communities, including the City of Kalamazoo. We've got kind of that green area of service that's highlighted there. This group here that we're talking to really is outside municipalities, separate service providers, retail service providers. That would be like South County, Gull Lake Sewer and Water Authority. We've got industrial partners, categorical industrial users, significant industrial users, that sort of thing. So you see that there's many communities represented, including the City of Kalamazoo in our wastewater system. Just give you some background on the treatment plant. We're designed for 53.5 MGD. We currently see about 27 million gallons per day. We're celebrating 70 years of successful operations and excellence this year. This facility has been continually operated since 1955. The work we do in this plant is important to protect the river. So this plant's the last step before we go to the Kalamazoo River. Our effluent discharge to the Kalamazoo River is actually cleaner than the river itself. So we're providing 27 million gallons a day of clean water to that river. We've got an excellent compliance rating, over 99.7%, average compliance rating since 2020. I introduced a little bit about some of the regulatory pressures and some changes that we've been undergoing. Looking back to 2017, we have an MPDS permit. That permit's valid for 5 years. That permit reissues every 5 years. When we got our new permit issued in 2017, it had a requirement that we were ordered to conduct a MAL study, a maximum allowable headworks loading study. Based on that study, we were required to determine a MAL, maximum allowable industrial load, and then we were also required to implement a new sewer use ordinance. That work took approximately 7 years. So we did the MAL study. From the results of that MAL study, we broke out and created a MAL. From the information that we had in that MAL, then we use that to create local limits. We use those local limits as kind of the framework for our new sewer use ordinance. That sewer use ordinance was ultimately approved by EGLE and adopted by the City Commission effective January 1st, 2024. Our industrial partners, the folks that are here with us today and those folks that are not in the room, certainly recognize the importance of that new sewer use ordinance. There's a lot of specificity and details, and really kind of brings us current. We had a sewer use ordinance prior to this. We were operating kind of under 1980s law. A lot of things have been dated, and we've really had a lot of updates with that. Speaking back to that MAL and that MAL, our treatment plant prior to the 2024 sewer use ordinance had no upper limit for BOD, solids, ammonia, and phosphorus. So we didn't have any limits or controls in any of the industries for those compatible pollutants. EGLE would not allow us to continue to operate like that, so we had to put in upper limits for compatible pollutants. Those have all been issued in your wastewater discharge permits, and some of you might be pretty tight. We calculated an exact amount for each industry. It's not a guaranteed loading. It's really kind of provides operations, but it's not an allowance. And we anticipate from a compatible pollutant standpoint that we'll have between 5 and 15% excursions within those parameters for any single industry. We also have an enforcement response plan. Our enforcement response plan is kind of our overall policy of how we implement and enforce our sewer use ordinance. That enforcement response plan was approved by EGLE, and that's what we follow when we do compliance. Really, our enforcement response plan is structured to take the minimal approach necessary to achieve compliance with our sewer use ordinance. So we're really trying to work with industries the best we can to enforce and regulate that sewer use ordinance. O&M and capital budget outlooks, getting kind of into the meat and potatoes of our overall budget. When I say O&M budget, I'm talking about direct revenue requirements. So we've got about a $40 million a year revenue requirement for the wastewater system. We've got capital within that, and we've got operations. Operations and maintenance, those are those costs dollar for dollar that we've got to bring in on a cash basis. Capital is a little bit different. We utilize bonds and some other funding mechanisms to produce our capital program. When we look at level of service, this is the work we're doing day in and day out. Things like regulatory requirements, operating the plant. Our permit is just now renewing. Our permit requirements are ever more stringent. We just installed new tertiary filters and a new tertiary system to help us continue to comply with that more stringent permit. Odor control, that's something that we've really been taking a lot of initiative in, and we've really increased our efforts to mitigate and treat odors here at this facility. We started work in 2019, really kind of ramping up that work, and we're going to continue along that line. Sludge disposal continues to be one of our single highest line items that we have. We're also doing a lot of work on the sewer system. We're looking at the overall CMOM approach, capacity management, operations, and maintenance within the sewer system itself. So we're spending more time in the collection system. We're spending more time in the collection system cleaning and inspecting pipe. We're also spending more time out there doing routine maintenance, where we've got a partnership with the Kalamazoo County Road Commission, where so all the roads outside of the city are maintained by either MDOT or the Road Commission, but the sewer pipes for the retail communities are maintained by the city proper. So when we come to a manhole, that's a structure that's maintained by the city proper, given our agreements that we have with the surrounding townships, but the roadway itself is maintained by either the Road Commission or MDOT. So that manhole is not their responsibility. It's not the township's responsibility because we provide that service for them. So we've worked with the Road Commission. We've got agreements in place where we purchase castings and we provide the castings to the Road Commission. The Road Commission then performs a manhole adjustment detail in accordance with the MDOT special provision. And then we get those manholes rebuilt out in the township, and then we just pay the Road Commission directly. So we're able to use local partnerships to provide enhanced level of service to the communities. We're also doing more with sewer lining. Sewer lining's a relatively new technology, but it's been with us for a number of years. Sewer lining's been going on for 40 to 45 years now. It's a way that we can take older pipe or pipe that has defects, misaligned joints, separated joints, root intrusion, that sort of thing, structural defects of the pipe itself, and then we can go out there and we can install a pipe within a pipe. So there's a felt that's impregnated with a resin, like a fiberglass, looks almost like a sock. It gets stretched out inside the sewer pipe. That resin, if anybody's bondoed a car or done anything like that, you can mix different resins and get some material that hardens up over time. It's the same kind of concept that we're doing to the pipe system. We can line pipes and increase the useful life of the pipe by another 40 to 50 years. So we're doing a lot of that work. We've got a project the City Commission just awarded at their last meeting we're going to go out to Comstock Township and start work on the Comstock Interceptor in a section to reline that. That's a pretty big pipe. I think we're going to be lining in the neighborhood of 36 to 42 inch segments diameter. So it's a pretty great use of that technology. We're also spending a lot of time at lift stations. We've had significant weather events over the last 5 years, including significant and major ice storms of our area. We've had a tornado, 2 tornadoes in our county in the last few years, and we've had some significant storm events, thunderstorm events that's knocked out power to many of our stations all at once. We operate and maintain 66 lift stations across the different municipalities, and when we get hit with a power outage and we've got to go out to these stations, we have to send licensed electricians to those stations. We've got a limited number of licensed electricians on staff, and when we have all those power outages all at the same time, it's nearly impossible for us to get to those stations. Some of our stations are known as emergency stations, so we rank stations based on criticality, and that criticality is based on our response time. So an emergency station means when we get the alarm in our control room that there's a problem with that station, we've got to go to that station immediately because the rate at which that station fills up is quick. So we've got stations that are fill up and would cause either sewer overflows or start backing into basements quicker than we can respond to them. So those are emergency stations. It's our goal to get all the emergency stations with on-site generators, and then once we've achieved that goal, we're going to start going down and going to our next priority stations with a goal over time to get generators installed at all of our lift stations. We talked about odor. A lot of work has been going on the front of odor reduction. We've got over an 89% reduction in background odor concentration within the community. We had a report issued in January 2025 that was issued by EGLE that continues to validate the success of our work to reduce odors in and around the community. And there's a lot of capital work that's gone into that. There's a lot of partnerships with local industries that's gone into that. And there's a lot of just operational day-to-day work that goes into that. We've got carbon scrubber units here in the treatment plant. You'll see those when you go around on your tour today. Those carbon scrubber units require carbon replacement on an annual basis. We also have odor control chemicals that we're feeding into the wet sludge storage. We feed hydrogen peroxide. We also feed in chemical as our sludge is going out to the landfill that helps abate the odors. And we're also maintaining 2 different web-based platforms, instrumentation, calibration programs, and staff to maintain the analytics of the program. Not counting the capital investments, just the operational commitments that we're making year after year after year, you're going to see $2.5 million within the 2026 budget dedicated just to odor control and reduction. We talked about sludge. This line you see on the chart, it's kind of continuing to go up. It's kind of going high and right. It looks like it's continuing to go there. That's our annual cost of sludge disposal. That's what we pay to take sludge and haul it to the landfill. If we were back in 2019, seems so far ago, yet not that long. It's all kind of in the same time. We were paying about $4.5 million a year. We're paying over $15 million a year now. So we've had tremendous increase of those costs in just a few years. We also rebid that contract. June of 2026, right around the corner, we've got a new contract. We don't know what that contract is yet because we're going to bid that out. So we've made some assumptions. We've escalated some costs. We're prepared to handle that, but that's going to be a factor that we might have to come back and revisit. We've really been taking a hard look at the cost of sludge disposal. We put together a residual biosolids project to look through future alternatives to sludge disposal. We sent out an RFI back in 2023. We've received that RFI back. We've done a lot of work. We've worked with stakeholder sessions to identify alternatives to the disposal that we're currently doing. We've narrowed that field down to a few technologies. We've then taken a selected technology and applied to the state of Michigan. Last year, we applied for the state of Michigan Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan program. Ultimately, we were not accepted into that program, so we're going to be making some changes. We're going to value engineer this project a little bit more, and we're going to look to apply next year. We have another stakeholder meeting to really dive deep into the sludge issue on November 12th. So many of you are going to be a part of that team as well, and we're going to look into some more cost-effective technologies to manage this issue. This is still a very costly issue for us. From a technology standpoint, we're looking at technology of around $135 million to implement a solution for what we're currently doing. Overall capital plan, I touched on this a little bit with some of the work we're doing in operations. We've got investment that we're really looking to do on those lift stations, investment we're looking to do on those collector sewers, those pipes. We've got those partnerships that we've talked about. We've also got plant mechanical equipment. The meat and potatoes of the treatment plant has some equipment in it that's still pretty, that's aging. Our final clarifiers are kind of on that list. That work's going to start this next year. So over the past few years, you saw us replace our solids dewatering equipment. We went from belt filter presses to centrifuges. We were able to get about a 5% increase in cake dryness. That saved us over $750,000 a year just to make that investment. We just completed our tertiary treatment building. We've got now a disc filter building online, so we've got cleaner effluent going to the river. We're meeting compliance. We're, really got a clean effluent going out to the river that's replaced a process that was about 45 years old, and those clarifiers are the next step. So we're going to be working through that clarifier process, and I touched on that sludge project. That sludge project alone is about $135 million. If you take all that capital plan over the next 5 years, it's $250 million. We've got $250 million of investment that we're going to be making in this facility, and then in that sewer system, that 800 miles of pipe that's kind of around the retail jurisdictions as well. What does that all mean for rates? Well, I can tell you it's pretty complicated. I'm going to give some background here. The city and the retail townships, as well as several of the municipalities that are in our shares group, we call those wholesale municipalities, have been entering into a negotiation to create a new master template for wastewater agreements. This same group have completed that work in water. We've got a new master agreement in water that was signed in 2021, that was re-signed with some changes in 2024. We've got a 40-year long-term agreement in water. Creates a lot of regional stability. That's been an excellent process. In water, we've got a water utility policy committee that meets on a monthly basis that helps to wrestle with issues such as policy, rates, those sort of things. We're using a lot of those same approaches in wastewater with the goal to come to a long-term agreement on a 40-year contract with all the surrounding municipalities. A lot of the focus of that is the same concepts in water, equalized rates so that we can have a simplified approach. We have a unified approach across governmental boundaries, and really would increase our overall regional cooperations and partnerships. I'm not going to read this all to you, but really kind of goes into some depth on what the equalized rate concept does for that broad customer base. The rate methodology that's in place today is a kind of textbook utility basis rate system. Under utility rate basis, when the system, which would be the city, invests in capital, those costs are kind of borne by the owner up front, and then over the life cycle charged back out to the customer base. I'm going to use the analogy of a pizza shop. If I own a pizza shop, we'll call it Joe's Pizza Shop. If I need to invest in my pizza shop, I've got to make that investment myself. If I need a new pizza oven, I've got to buy the pizza oven. Once that pizza oven's in place and I'm making pizza, the price per slice for pizza can reflect that investment of the pizza oven. Over time, that investment in that pizza oven is reflected in the price of the pizza. And that cycle repeats and oscillates over time as investment is carried out. Same thing happens in the sewer system. When we invest in the treatment plant, the city ratepayers pay for that investment. As that investment is put into use and that investment is charged out to industries in a per gallon rate, and that's charged out to municipalities in a per gallon rate, over time that rate increases. And it creates these oscillations over time. The reality is that there's always going to be a time when either the in-city rate is higher or lower than the out-city rate, and the out-city rate is higher than or lower than the in-city rate. That creates a very complex rate-making process that also creates some uncertainty and points of conflict politically. If we're bringing a rate recommendation forward to the City Commission, for example, that has a higher rate for in-city customers and a lower rate for out-city customers, that's going to look as a point of conflict. In the same line, if we're bringing a rate to the out-city townships and say, hey, you got to pay more, there's a question of, well, why is it? Isn't the service the same? Why are we paying more? So from taking a broad regional approach and looking at this as a system, we're able to create overall better stability for the system, overall better stability for the customers, and then we can equalize the service we provide to the rates and provide just an overall uniform approach that's better for everybody. So how do we do that? There's a lot of moving parts and pieces in this. There's kind of the fundamental base group of in-city, out-city, and how do we bring those two together? We're kind of bringing those together in a similar fashion that we did on the water utility. Wastewater is much more complicated than the water utility. We have many different customer classes, so there's all different things going on. We have major cost changes happening also. So we've got the rate equalization concept, we've got costs that are changing, and we're blending all these things together. We're also doing it in a manner that's going to smooth things out over time. So if we look at the cost for that $135 million investment in biosolids, that's a tremendous cost. That's going to take a lot of rate to support that. When it's built, that's also going to sustain rates because it's going to lower our operational costs. So our capital costs are going up, but our operational costs will go down. So what we've done is we've kind of created a test year, so we've put all that work out in 2031, and then we've smoothed that back and make all the changes going back. The cost of solids, again, we went from $4.5 million a year to $15 million a year to dispose of it. We're having a more stringent effluent permit limitation. We just invested $26 million in disc filters to take solids out of the process so they don't go to the Kalamazoo River. So some assumptions that we had in the 1980s are no longer holding true in terms of our cost analysis, level of service analysis when we look into the details of kind of who pays for what and how we pay for it. We also have increasing lab costs. We've talked about all the work that we've got to do, the EPA is requiring for the industries. We're testing for things like foam and PFAS and surfactants and all this stuff that's happening now that's unique to our Industrial Pretreatment Program that really doesn't have anything to do with our municipal customers. Our municipal customers are kind of the background loading or domestic loading, so there's changes happening with that as well. So we talked about setting that test year for 2031 when everything kind of aligns and smooths back out, taking what that rate adjustment would be and then bringing that back to today. So we're not having a huge all-at-once change, we're smoothing that out over time. This chart kind of breaks that out for two major customer groups. This is our in-city retail and our out-city retail. There's 7 municipalities that this chart applies to, and that provides kind of a year-by-year breakdown of where those rates are going over time. Again, the goal is to create stability and smoothing that all out by the time we get to 2031. Shares is another group that we've talked about. Shares is kind of an abbreviation that we put together from a cost of service analysis. When we do rate making, rates are always done from a prospective basis. That means we're looking out into the future to calculate what our revenue requirements are going to be next year. The year that we're in isn't done. 2025 is the year that we're in right now. From a budget perspective, we have at best 9 months of data, more like 6 months of data that we can look at. So we don't really know what's happening here. We've got to go back to 2024 and look what happened in 2024 to understand where we came in from a budget perspective and where our revenue came in from our customers. We then take that information and we apply it to what we know about where costs are going into 2026. Again, it's a perspective exercise trying to look into the future. What we saw historically is that both industries and municipalities over time had some variations in flow, and some of them could be very erratic. We had wet periods. A lot of our wastewater customers from a wholesale basis are master metered into the city. That means if those customer communities are experiencing periods of wetness, flooding, they might be flowing more through their meter to us. Industries might be going through increased production due to market factors or reduced production due to market factors. So we created a concept to look at sustained headworks allocation revenue requirement. So what that's saying is that we looked at 2 years of history on a municipal customer or an industrial customer, and then averaged that out and created kind of a placeholder, if you will, to say this municipality or this industry is going to provide this much loading to the headworks in the future. So we applied that concept, and that creates a lot of stability for those customers, because from a municipality perspective, we can just tell them what their monthly payment's going to be. Every month for the next year, your payment's going to be this, no matter if your flow goes up or goes down. We then, every year, we look back at what the previous 2 years were. We're in our, I want to say, 3rd year of this program. I have to ask Colin and see if he remembers. Maybe it's their 3rd year of this program. So some things we've learned. We have not been able to successfully predict what our industrial partners are doing. We've taken a few industries out of shares. We've had a few industries come to us and tell us we don't want to participate in shares. We've taken a look at some very large industries and said, I don't think it makes sense for you to be in shares. Given all that, we had 2 industries that were remaining in shares, and we're not going to offer shares for industries no longer in 2026. So all industries are just going to go to a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. Whatever goes through the meter, whatever the lab analytics tell us, that's what you pay. Many industries are already there, but this is the final program of kind of phasing that out. Municipalities are still in shares. Municipalities are working very well in shares, continue to provide pretty stable revenue projections, and we're seeing that the prospective analysis continues to hold true. This provides this, so these charts that are in the slide deck, they come from the rate report. So everybody has a rate report. That rate report goes into and reference all of these data tables, so you'll be able to see these data tables and see where you're at. So you see that there's kind of that system rate requirement, system rate increase, and then whether you're shares, municipality, domestic customer, monitored industry, you'll see a specific charge for you. And I've also kind of pulled those out on this whiteboard here so that you can see that base 9%, retail goes up 1.5%. If you have got the domestic adjustment, that applies as well. So for example, the city, 9% is the base, 1.5% gets us to 10.5%, and then we've got the 0.7 adjustment, so city goes up to approximately 11.5%. There is rounding in some of these tables. Some of the tables may not directly reference because they're calculating some other value out, or they're taking like a 12-month factor and they're averaging it out over a single month or something like that. If you see any issue with the table, please pull me aside afterwards. I would love to chat with you. If you look at the date, we got this yesterday, so this is still going to go through some review. We'll talk about that in our next steps as well. This table, and this table that's in front of us right now with that yellow highlighting is page 11 in your packet, in your rate report packet. So this table, sorry, I don't know how well everybody can see on the screen there, but the color codes are representing kind of different classifications. So these are all of our municipalities. This is Portage, Galesburg, Vicksburg, Gull Lake, Augusta, Matawan, South County, and Charleston. Portage, because Portage has two different accounts based on different interceptors that they flow into on different meters. The yellow is representing lift stations. That's saying that community has lift stations that the city, from a retail perspective, also operates and maintains. The charges for lift stations for these communities were billed separately previously. We're just rolling that into the rate now. So no real change to the community. It's just the community pays that now in their base rate. This chart shows what the existing rates are. Portage right now pays $453,800 per month in that account. They're going to go in the future and pay next year $461,400 per month for that account. There's two things happening. Is that municipality's flow increasing or decreasing when we look at that 2-year average and the last 12 months? Are they bringing that average up or are they bringing that average down? And then what is the impact from a system rate perspective and a shares rate perspective for those municipalities, also applying the domestic adjustment if that applies. So those factors together, it's overall for shares communities, it's a rate reduction. But if that share community's flow is increasing, it might, their charge is going to be different. So who in this room drives a car? A few people. Who drives a truck? Chad drives a truck. So for someone that drives a car and Chad who drives a truck, if you both go to the gas pump, you're going to pay the same rate for gas, but Chad's probably going to pay more because Chad probably is going to pump more in his truck, unless his truck's an EV. Is it EV? No, okay, it's not an EV. So this percent change is anywhere from negative 35% all the way to positive 21.9%. We didn't apply different rate increases to different municipalities. The rates are consistent across all municipalities based on the type of service provided, and that's detailed. But it's whether or not their flow from a 12-month basis is trending up or down. So those communities that are showing a negative change, their flow is down. The communities that are showing a positive change, their flow is up. I'd be happy to meet with any of the communities or talk into that. If you're a community that's showing a flow increase or a flow decrease, we've also got the raw data that we can provide as well to go into a little bit deeper dive with that. Changing gears here, talking about industry. So there's two slides related to this. They're I've cut them in half so that we can continue to talk through it. So that domestic adjustment is occurring on the volume charges. So some background. In the 1980s, all the industries were heavy solids producers. They had a lot of solids in their flow. So from a volume standpoint, when we do the cost of service analysis, there was no loading applied to the volume. The volume was strictly hydraulics, meaning from a cost of service analysis, we looked at collector sewers, interceptors, lift stations, and the flow components of the treatment plant. Solids were charged by your solids loading, which is down here, TSS loading. Fast forward to today, where we're at with overall cost of service and charges to domestic, and where we're at with the industries, we see that from a domestic perspective, we allocate about 259 milligrams per liter for suspended solids. Anything above 259 milligrams per liter is surcharged. So industries that discharge higher than 259 milligrams per liter are pay a per kilogram rate for their solids. That's what this is detailing down here. For industries that aren't higher than 259 milligrams per liter, under our former calculations, they didn't pay anything for solids, zero. And if we look at the amount of flow compared to domestic, that was kind of creating a void. So we had municipalities, for example, Portage, we allocate the domestic loading to the city of Portage. We allocate 259 milligrams per liter to that flow that we get from city of Portage, and that from a cost of service analysis goes into treatment, solids, all the things that we talked about that require O&M dollars or capital dollars. If we look at similar flow to one of the industries who is below that 259, we're not applying any cost for any solids. So the domestic adjustment creates a baseline. So all industries will pay a baseline of domestic. And that's consistent with sewer use ordinance, that's consistent with EPA methodology. Essentially says if you're below 259 or 239 on BOD, you're going to pay at least that domestic rate. You would pay the same rate that City of Portage would pay for the flow. If you're above that, you would pay a per kilogram rate above that for that same parameter, whether that's COD, solids, phosphorus, or Pfizer. The next charge, these about 12 cents a meter charge, that's for those specific costs for that industrial pretreatment program. Those are those lab costs that are specific to industries themselves. Our lab costs have continued to increase year over year as we've implemented that new sewer use ordinance and the EPA regulations and protocols. So those are costs that we're kind of isolating and pulling those out. We've got those broken down. We can show you. We don't have it in the presentation, but that's part of our background information that we can provide that to the industries as well. Overall, the wastewater rates, what that impact would be to the customer, these are very detailed. Obviously, we've got many different industries here that have many different processes, that sort of thing, so we didn't break down everything. Every industry has a report in here to show you what those costs will be over time in the rate report. We've broken out and showed what a typical city retail customer increase would look like and a typical township retail customer increase would look like. It's about $2.69 a month for a typical in-city user and about $2.02 a month for a typical retail user. In terms of where we at compared across Michigan, you see that we continue to be below average. Average is about $39.76 a month. You see that the different color codes are Kalamazoo inside before the proposed rate in 2026, after the proposed rate in 2026, Kalamazoo outside before the proposed rate, Kalamazoo outside after the proposed rate. A lot of these communities are just already neck and neck from Muskegon to Holland, almost the same cost. One thing to keep in mind is many communities have a fiscal year in July, and when we hit July, we can look at the same chart, and these communities will kind of reorient themselves as well. When I started out, I said we're going to recognize some some industries for a lot of the great work they've been doing. So we're going to do that now. Want to recognize Graphic Packaging and Gani Bag for all your work that you've been doing on the focus of microplastics, and a lot of innovation there, a lot of reduction, and a lot of great work that helps to protect the environment and really helps our industry overall. We also want to recognize Bell's for outstanding sustainability. We all know Bell's is an innovator and leader in the food and beverage industry, but what some folks might know is all the innovation, leadership, and education that they're doing in the world of wastewater. Bell's has their own wastewater facility on their site, so they do a lot of pretreatment, and they're just doing a lot of great things out there. We've learned a lot from Bell's. We continue to learn a lot from Bell's, and we continue to partner with them. So thank you so much for all your great work. We also want to recognize the Allnex Corporation, Brandon Phillips, and Allied Geosyntech with Brian Giese. And we've got some certificates and plaques for you guys. I don't know if you want to pass them out now, or Colin can pass them out. Next steps, we plan to propose recommended water and wastewater rate increases to the City Commission on December 1st. We're going to be going through some additional peer review on our rate recommendations. We're going to be working with folks on that, and there could be some changes to this, not material changes, but we could be cleaning up some of the tables, that sort of thing. Based on whether or not we move forward after December 1st with the City Commission, we would then recommend a ordinance offered for public hearing on the 15th. And then if that's approved by City Commission, rates would go into effect on January 1st, 2026. So that's kind of our timeline. That's what we're proposing to move forward with. That's all I've got. Again, thank you everybody for coming out. Really appreciate it. We are going to have a tour, and so please stick around for that. So this concludes our presentation, and again, we'll be available, any municipality, any industry. If you want to look at your flow numbers, if you want to get a little bit more background on some things, lab costs, that sort of thing, we're happy to provide all that data for you.